Welcome in to the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast, the official podcast of your New Orleans Pelicans. A podcast dedicated to everything you need to know about the squad. Hear from players, coaches, broadcasters, and those who cover the NBA on a daily basis. It's time to flock up. The New Orleans Pelicans Podcast starts right now.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast, your official podcast of your New Orleans Pelicans. It is time to talk Pels basketball once again. Jim Eichenhofer, Pelicans.com with us. Coming up, a radio roundtable, as we like to do every other Friday. John DeShazier, Todd Graffagnini, the gentlemen that have the call each and every game. They will give some insight as to what we've seen so far through the month of January. It's pretty cool. You want to stick around, MVPs, unsung heroes, games to pay attention to in February. That's all coming here as well. Last time we were with you was the day of a game as well on Wednesday. Team taking on Dallas and coming up just a little short, as in 1 point short. Yesterday, head coach Willie Green had this to say after looking at the tape and what he saw in that game.
I mean, to put up 136 points, that's elite offense. Playing fast, we're sharing the ball, we're taking care of the basketball offensively, low turnovers. I'd like to see our threes up a little bit more, but overall, really good game offensively. Once again, the defense for us is that we get the stops. That's 16 opportunities that you got to stop. Just finishing those possessions is key for us, especially in a one-possession game.
All right, so Jim, you were there yesterday with Coach Green talking, and that's what he was saying there as well. When you take a look at that game, what stood out to you in that?
Yeah, I mean, I think this might be something that we get into in more detail on Monday's show, but I think it was a classic example of really the defense and the rebounding were areas that hurt you. The fact that he mentioned that you gave up 16 offensive rebounds, Dallas had 32 second chance points, which is a conversion rate that's just way too high. The fact that they averaged 2 points per offensive rebound and second chance that they got, and then giving up the 137 points. That's been something that has been a problem lately. That if you just look at the raw numbers and you look at the amount of points that the Pelicans have been giving up in their recent stretch of losses, it's been too high, and they've dipped from what they did in that area earlier in January. So just areas that they're going to have to improve upon. And if they don't do that against Boston, I think it's going to be a long night. So, but hopefully when we come back here on Monday, we'll be talking about how much they improved defensively and rebounding-wise against the Celtics.
Yeah, let's see that. You mentioned the Celtics. The last time these two teams played, it was a fantastic game.
Mm-hmm.
C.J. McCollum just could not get that high kiss off the glass to go in. Coach was asked yesterday, hey, what's it going to take tonight?
It's got to be much of the same. We have to start the game with the physical mindset, defensively, forcing those guys to put the ball on the floor. They're really good at, they're going to shoot 53s, and they shoot it at a high clip and high percentage. So forcing them to do some things that they don't want to do, we got to finish possessions defensively, offensively, continue to play fast and share the ball.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. We talked about how Wednesday was a 1 point loss. The Boston game was also a 1 point loss as well. I mean, I thought in the game on January 12th that they played at TD Garden that we saw, we're going to get into this a little bit in the radio roundtable as well, but we saw some of the elements of what we envision the Pelicans to be when they're at their best or close to their best. We saw Trey Murphy. I mean, maybe that wasn't the best game he played this season, but it was close to it. And when you consider the scene that they're playing a game in Boston against the reigning NBA champs, and he had 30 points in that game, 10 for 17 from the field. DeJounte Murray had a really good game. It just seemed to me like that was the, kind of close to the best that we've seen. It was actually a rare, inefficient game for Zion. He was 5 for 15 from the field in that game. I mean, that's such an outlier compared to the way he's played throughout the month of January, or at least the way he shot the ball in January. Mm-hmm. But he also had 5 steals in that game. So, I mean, I'm really looking forward to this game tonight just to see how they follow up now on their home floor against a Boston team that they competed against so well. Jason Tatum had 38 points in that game too. So, I mean, the Celtics had some really good performances as well. But I think this will be a fun game tonight. I know it's going to be pretty full in the arena as well, so it should be a fun atmosphere.
Yeah, should be fun. I know there'll be a nice crowd there as well. So remember, there's a lot of different restrictions out there. So if you go into this night's game, give yourself some time. And more importantly, let's have a little fun tonight. All right, I know we're going to have fun next. The Radio Roundtable, John DeShazier, Todd Graffagnini, Mr. Eichenhofer, myself will have a handful of topics. I think you'll enjoy this. All right, time now for our Radio Roundtable, and we welcome in the voices of your New Orleans Pelicans, Todd Graffagnini and Mr. John DeShazier. Always a pleasure, guys, when we have y'all. Hard to believe the month of January is pretty much in the books here, and we're under the halfway point or over the halfway point, however you want to look at it. Ty, we'll start with you, sir. Do we have a team MVP? Can you look at it and say right now at this point, do we have a team MVP?
Well, I mean, it's tough when you have 12 wins, but I think the player that, and I think my partner would agree with this, it's DeJounte Murray. I don't think there's any doubt if Murray would not have gotten injured on opening night, the Pelicans would not be in the position that they are right now with 12 wins. I mean, just to see what he does across the board. And look, by his standards, he's really not scoring the way he had coming to New Orleans before the trade. But still, you'll take 18 points a game. But what he's doing, he's rebounding the ball. He's dishing. He's got the 9 double-doubles. The steals. He leads the team in steals. He leads the team in assists. It's just a shame that we never got to see him, really at his full peak. Which is because he missed a month and a half. And there's no way the Pels would have 12 wins right now if he was not playing every single day.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to add to that. I mean, the Pels are 9-21 with him, 3-15 without him. Now, you can say neither one is impressive, but 9-21 is a whole lot better than 3-15.
Sure.
And his presence, when he's not playing, you can see it and you can feel it. They have difficulty getting into their offense. They have difficulty with perimeter defense. They have a lot of difficulties when he's not on the – you see teams pick them up 94 feet when he's not playing, and I would too. But he makes that kind of difference for him. So hopefully it's something that we'll see him on the court for an extended period of time. And Graf mentioned he's not shooting the ball well. He's shooting 39% from the field and 30% from three. He has not played to the back of his card. But you feel like at some point you're going to get a 15 to 20 game stretch where he will, and you're going to say, man, that's what it looks like.
And just to add on to that, we didn't really understand it until we saw him play all those games. We didn't know what we were missing, basically. Mm-hmm. And then he played in Memphis, did not play in Charlotte, and the drop-off was so dramatic. It's like
fell off the table.
Oh yeah. And that's why we had that discussion in Charlotte. We just didn't realize how valuable he was to the team until I wouldn't say you took it for granted, but you kind of took it for granted.
Coincidentally, the Pelicans are playing the Celtics tonight, and I remember last season the part of the year that impressed me the most about what DeJounte Murray did with the Hawks was the stretch when Trae Young was out. They played a couple games against Boston. They beat them. I think he had a game winner in one of those games. And then in the first matchup against the Celtics, he almost had a triple-double. He had 26 points, 9 rebounds, 8 assists. So I'm curious to see how he's going to do tonight. But for my MVP, I went so far outside the box on this that you might need to send someone to find me. But I went with two of the things that I think have clearly lacked the most this season that we most wanted to see that we haven't seen is the wins, obviously, that they only have 12, but also the player availability. So for my MVP, I went with Yves Missi because he leads the team with 45 games played. So I thought
that's not bad.
Yeah,
it's not far-fetched.
Okay.
I thought we were going to have to look for Jim on the milk carton, but that's not far-fetched.
I've got no problem with that either.
And I wanted to add a couple things to that, too, just along the same lines of winning and impact on winning. So Yves Missi, leader in games played with 45. If you look at all of the records of the players on the Pelicans in the games that they've played, Jose Alvarado has the best winning percentage at 10-15. And now I have a quick trivia question I wanted to see if anyone could get. Which Pelicans player has appeared in the most wins this season? There's no one on the team that's played in all 12 wins, but there's one guy that's played in all 11. See if any of you guys can get this.
Ooh.
All 11.
Get one guess.
It's Yves Missi.
Nope. He missed the 2 Utah games.
Brandon
Boston.
Nope. It's Jeremiah Robinson Earl with 11 wins that he's played.
JRE.
So those are my 3 aspects of MVP. Yves Missi, most games played. JRE's played in the most wins. Jose has the best winning percentage.
I mean, Jim made it sound like he was going to say like
Ball boy.
Yeah, I mean, he made it sound like he was going to say like Omer Ashik or something. I mean, he came up with a reasonable dude.
Okay.
I mean,
all right.
What does it say though that we don't have a player that's played in all 12 wins? Is that the most unbelievable? I mean, is that the most unbelievable thing?
Of a year.
When you can think of it like that, it's crazy when you think of it. All right, so what, Jim? Do we start with you then? Because the next topic is most improved player from the start of the season. Now, you have it to where last year?
You can pick either way. I felt like you could go in either direction. I wasn't sure if you were saying you should start with me because I've improved the most over the course of the season.
Well, because you were with Yves Misi. And Todd, you spoke with James Borrego for Pelicans Weekly. And the end of that conversation, you guys talked about Yves. And I clearly remember him telling you, he's like, hey, we saw that dunk over DeJounte Murray in Nashville, but none of us thought he'd have the impact on the team. So I will start with you. Is Yves Misi your most improved?
I actually didn't go with him, though I easily could have. And I'm sure if these guys have that I won't dispute that at all. I went with Trey Murphy based on he's averaged 6.4 points per game more than he did last season. Obviously, his role's expanded. He's shown other elements of his game that we hadn't seen before. And I think he's just reached a different level as a player, so that's why I picked him. But in season, I also went with Daniel Tice based on, I think he's the player, if you look at everyone individually, the player that most reflects the marginal improvement that they made in January compared to the early part of the season. He was a minus 88 and plus minus in October through December. In January, he's been plus 27. So just I feel like he kind of personifies that. You know, the record in January still now isn't great because of the last few losses, but it's been much more competitive this month than it was through December 31st. They won 5 games in the 2024 calendar. They've won 7 already in 2025. And Daniel Tice, I think, has been the guy that most went from needed to show improvement and has done that over the last few weeks.
I got nothing to add. I mean, it's Trey Murphy. It's a slam dunk. Mm-hmm. He's just taken the most of his opportunity. And Brandon Ingram going down opened the door up for Trey, and he has kicked it in, like Bum Phillips once said. And it's going to be really hard to take him out of that starting lineup. Now, you can pretty much count on him for 20 points a game. Mm-hmm. And, you know, the 3-point shot still from night to night isn't as consistent as you'd like it to be. But when he gets hot, it's tough. You know, that game against Dallas, it's, you know, you kind of get lost in it, but he scores 32 points and had 5 threes. And you get that, again, more consistently. He's over 20 points a game, but if he is at 22, 23 a game and making 3-4 threes a night, plus his ability to get to the free throw line now, he is becoming an offensive force. And we're just, you know, we're seeing the tip of it because he still is young in this league. And we're seeing the spectacular alley-oops now, and just the rebounding and the defense has improved. So it's got to be Trey Murphy.
Yeah, really good honorable mentions in Yves Misi and Daniel Tice. But I agree with the group. It's Trey Murphy. And here's the thing. He is rounding out his game. Now, before this season, his high was averaging 2.6 free throws a game. This year, he's at 4.5. But I mean, he really has turned it up. Last 8 games, he's averaging 6.6 free throw attempts. You know, I had a 12 free throw attempt game in there. And the thing about that is he's manufacturing points in different ways now instead of just relying on the 3. Now he's making a couple of mid-range shots. He's finishing at the rim. He's finishing over people with dunks. Mm-hmm. But he's getting to the foul line. And the guy shoots free throws the way he does. Those are like freebies when he gets to the free throw line. He's shooting 90% from the line. So the more you get there, the better for you if you're Trey Murphy. And those are the easier points. Now you got to take some contact to get them, but those are the easier points where you get a chance to rest and those kinds of things, and you don't have to exert as much injury. So it's good to see him get a little deeper into his bag, off the dribble, get to the rim, finish, or draw contact and get to the line. That's been the most impressive thing for me. Now, all his numbers are obviously up because he's, you know, career high in minutes, points, rebounds, assists, those things. I want to see him in the starting lineup because I think he is a really good fit with Zion Williamson. Z draws so much attention when he's out there, And so when he draws that attention, you got guys that you can kick to. And obviously, if you want to kick to an outside shooter, who better than Trey Murphy? So I'd like to see him on the floor. But sometimes that situation doesn't necessarily matter that much who starts in the NBA. It's who finishes. And he's a dude who now I think he's got to play 32, 35 minutes, right? I mean, somehow. You don't have to start, but you got to get those 32, 35 minutes out of him because he's that valuable on the floor. So, yeah, I'd like to see him in the starting lineup because I think he's a really good fit for what this team does, especially as a starter. But he's got to just be on the floor for that amount of minutes, and especially he's got to be on the floor down the stretch because down the stretch, if it's a close game, clutch game, you need dudes who can make free throws.
Well, I also think, too, the next kind of step in what the evolution of Trey Murphy can be also is when you get down to these clutch situations, is he going to start taking shots at the very, very end? Because we really haven't seen him do that yet. I think that's the next step. You know, if there's 10 seconds left and you're down by one, I'd like to see Trey take the last shot at some point.
And you know what else? I think you alluded to it, Graf. I think he's got the ability to, I don't know if he can be an elite defender, but he can be a really good defender.
Well, he's so much better than what he has been.
He's long and athletic, and he knows how to play help defense now. You see him playing better on-ball defense. I think he's got some elements there. I'll never say he's going to be all defensive, but, I mean, he's got some elements there to where he's certainly in the weakness that he used to be.
And by the way, too, to JD's point about how he fits with the group of guys and to what Graf said earlier, too, about his inconsistency three-point shooting relative to maybe last season or the previous couple of years. I think as he plays with Zion more, he's going to get even better looks. So I think we'll see the consistency come up. We'll see his percentages raised too, because I think we saw in the past he's at his best when he gets, maybe 3 to 5 of those trail threes where they're running a fast break and they dish it back to him and he's wide open. It seems like he shoots at his best when he gets a bunch of those opportunities. And I don't think they've been there at a high rate throughout the season, but now that Zion is back and hopefully in a stretch coming up where he's going to be on the floor consistently, we'll see that from Trey.
I like to see him and Z in some pick and rolls because what you're going to do? You're going to double Z, you're going to double Trey, you're going to play him one-on-one because if you're going to play him one-on-one, Z's going to abuse somebody. Right. And if you give help, then you're leaving Trey.
And Trey can play above the rim.
Yeah. So, he just presents some interesting combinations.
I think a lot of the things that you guys mentioned, too, what I'm about to ask y'all in 30 seconds or less, has to do with minutes. But does he have the ingredients? I think so. And you've heard some teammates say it this year, left or right here. Does he have the ingredients to be an all-star player, Trey Murphy?
Of course. Yes. I mean, he's got all the tools. He really does. And again, he's still, I think he's stopped growing. I don't think he's going to be a 7-footer, but I mean, 6'10" is enough. Mm-hmm. But he can shoot, he can defend, he can get to the rim, he can get to the line. And I absolutely, at some point, he should be an all-star.
Yeah, I can name that tune in 5 seconds. Yes.
Yeah, I think there's other, I don't want to make too many comparisons to other players, specific players across the NBA, but I think we've seen that sometimes when people try to put a cap on a player in his second or third year and they say that's all he can be, he's not going to be better than that. He's been in the league long enough to we've seen enough to know. I feel like he's one of those cases where maybe in his 5th, 6th year that he will if he keeps progressing at the rate he is, I think he definitely could get into all-star conversation.
All right, guys, what about...
So I got a soapbox to jump on with that, and it's going to take more than 30 seconds. When they say a guy doesn't have a ceiling and he's 22, 23 years old, that is just effing unbelievable. Mm-hmm. You're going to tell me a guy doesn't have the capacity to improve and he's 22, 23, 24 years old? Right. You got to be kidding me. Now, if you got a guy who has no work ethic, yeah, you're right. Sure. You're spot on. Mm-hmm. But if you don't know what's inside a guy and how much desire he has, I hate those blanket statements. That drives me nuts.
I think that's kind of springs from the mentality that's seeped into the league the last bunch of years. You could talk about this with the media or even some of the teams themselves where they say that about guys coming into the league that played 2 years in college. Yeah. That part of it has become so prominent too. I mean, I think that's kind of just an offshoot of that. It's like we want to speed up the process of this guy has to be this kind of player by X date, or else just cast him aside and give up on him and throw him away, that he's never going to be anything better than what he is now. So
Yeah. All right. Let me ask you all this. We're going to get to some game stuff here as well. 12 wins. Is there one that stands out? But is there an unsung hero? We talked about an MVP. Is there an unsung hero for you?
Javonte Green. Didn't realize what kind of a player he was. I mean, he's relentless out there. Now, you're not going to count on him to score 15 points a night, but he affects the game in many, many ways, and he is not afraid to get down and dirty, get on the floor, and who'd have known that he could go baseline and do a reverse, right-hand throwdown. I mean, he's got some hops for being 6'4". I just think that, and look, now Zion's playing regularly. Let's knock on that. But who's first off the bench when Zion goes in? It's Javonte Green. So the coaches think enough of him that he's going to be the first sub for Z. So that's mine.
Yeah, me and Graff are ESP today.
Here we go.
Or ESPN. You can put either one. But I mean, yeah, I say Javonte. I mean, he's one of those guys who he's going to play hard, and he doesn't care who the dude is that you tell him to guard. He's going to guard him, and he's going to be like, all right, I know who you are, but I'm me, and you're going to have to show me that you can score, because I'm gonna get in your hip pocket and I'm going to stay there. And so, the scoring, to me, the numbers will not ever be great, but he is just a dude who, winning teams have those kinds of guys, who do the things that he does. They play defense. They come up with steals. They get rebounds. They'll make a three every now and then. He'll get out on the break. He'll lead a break. Those kinds of things matter. He makes winning plays. He makes successful plays.
Yeah, I remember going back to training camp, watching him day in and day out over the course of a week. I was like, I really like this guy. But I think, you just referenced it, JD. I think he reminds me a little bit of Herb Jones in that we see the impact that he makes, but I think he makes even more sense on a winning team that is up there in the standings, that's winning games, where he's in a certain role, and he is kind of in that Najee Marshall kind of role too, where the defensive impact is bigger when you're on a defense that's good overall, and you don't have to, kind of plug as many holes as Herb has had to do when he was healthy this season. So I like that pick a lot too. I just went with, for unsung hero, I went with Brandon Boston, because on a two-way contract, he's third on the Pelicans in games played with 40. He's still scored the fourth most points total this season with 427, even though he just had a recent stretch of 5 games where he was inactive because of his two-way contract status. And then he's also second in steals with 51 total. So, I mean, for a guy on a two-way contract, I don't think there's any doubt that across the entire NBA, he's had the biggest role and made the biggest impact statistically, helped them win some games earlier in the season as well.
That's a great call.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is.
Now, and back to Javonte. Now, Graff will have to answer this because he's seen it more than I have. Is there a happier dude on the team?
No, he's always got a smile.
I mean,
he's always joking around.
Yeah, he's pretty infectious.
He really is.
Yeah.
If there was a dancing competition, I feel like he would be the first one to raise his hand, because every time I see him in shoot around, he's dancing too. So
yeah, I mean, he's just a guy who enjoys life in the game.
Look, and I don't want to kind of put him into a corner here, but look, this is the guy came out of a small school, Radford. I mean, that's a guy who really had to scratch and claw to even get into the league. So why wouldn't he be? Why wouldn't he have the personality that he has? Because I mean, he's a vet now. I mean, he is a veteran in the NBA, and it's and I'm sure the road was not very easy to get there for him. So and it's an infectious personality.
One of the things that I want to look at as well, I know there's only been 12, but is there a win that stands out to you of the 12?
I've thought about this. Now, again, it's there's not a whole lot to choose from, which is, unfortunate, but I'm going to go with Philadelphia, the first game of that road trip a couple of weeks ago. I mean, you think, and it's all circumstance here.
Right.
It's all circumstance. If you think about what happened leading up to that game, Herb Jones goes down, and he's not going to be back anytime soon. So you're like, man. And then we find out that Zion Williamson was suspended for that game. So you're going into Philly, start of a road trip, with not the guys that you thought you were going to have going in. And I pulled up the box score. Now, you think of the lineup here. You've got C.J. McCollum, DeJounte Murray, Javonte Green, Jordan Hawkins, and Yves Missi. Those were the starters in that game. Off the bench, Brandon Boston, J.R.E., Daniel Tice, Jose Alvarado. So you played 9 guys that night and won the game in Philly. Now, they didn't have Embiid. Okay, whatever. But that is a tough place to play. I don't care what you're talking about. And to go in there and win that game, and I actually had a chance to interview Willie Green post-game. I did a one-on-one with him, and you could actually see that win meant a lot to him, and you could see moisture forming in his eyes. I mean, he was very emotional after that game just because of everything that had happened up to that point. So I'm going to go with the Philly game. It was a tremendous night. It really was.
Now me being me, I'm going to cheat here, and that's a great call, Graff. The Philly game, I'm going to cheat because I think the best win for me was the end of that road trip at Chicago.
Yep.
They came off a tough loss in Boston, and it was one of those kind of games where it was a little precarious all the way down the stretch, and they clutched it out at the end. Just made the right plays at the end. Jose Alvarado with a couple of threes away from, off Zion Williamson assists. And they just kind of clutched it out where, it was one of those games where they could have folded and they didn't. And so I feel like that was the best win. But I feel like the best game was the one prior to that against Boston.
No doubt about that.
The best game was at Boston to give themselves a chance all the way at the end when there were a couple of 5-point deficits down the stretch where it looked like the grip was slipping and it was like, you know what? This is going to go from 5 to 15 in a hurry. And they were like, no. It was like they were grabbing on, tugging on Boston's cape the whole time. Like, we ain't going anywhere. We're not going away. And they didn't. They didn't. Had a chance to win it at the buzzer, which, it didn't pull it out. But I just felt like it was so impressive because Boston was pretty much full strength. Mm-hmm. And it was like, man, there were like 5 times in the game where I felt like, boy, this could get ugly in a hurry. This could get ugly. And I said that to myself maybe 5 times, and it never got ugly because they kept digging and scratching and clawing.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the most encouraging performances, maybe the most in terms of just overall big picture, the fact that they only lost that game by 1 and they had a chance to win at the buzzer. So I like that pick as well. I mean, for me, for best win, I went with December 5th against the Suns. This feels like forever ago, even though it was less than 2 months ago. Herb Jones returned from an injury. He blocked Devin Booker at the buzzer. It was just a fun way to end the game. So that was one of their better wins for sure. And then I had honorable mention November 15th against Denver because that was by far the best opponent that the Pelicans have beaten this season if you look at the records of the teams across the league. So that was an impressive performance. Also feels like forever ago, mid-November.
And I'll give a quick honorable mention, too, opening night.
Yeah.
We had everybody available except for Zion, and we overwhelmed Chicago. And it was like we got a real good chance to be, a solid team this year. And then, of course, it went away quickly.
Yeah. All right, so hard to believe January is in the books here. February coming up. We got a couple of interesting, we got the All-Star break. We got Super Bowl week that you guys are going to be on the road.
Yep.
Mardi Gras road week here as well. When you look at the schedule in the month of February, there are a lot of road games, but there's some interesting home games there. Anything stand out to you?
I said this in the last podcast. I want OKC. I want to beat Oklahoma City, especially there. I know the task is very, very tall. They're just... I mean, if they don't go to the finals, then something's wrong because they're just. And with SGA, I mean, SGA is going to win the MVP.
MVP talk.
Even though Jokic probably should, but SGA is going to win it. But I just something about playing those guys kind of gets the juices going, and also that back-to-back in Phoenix at the end of the month. If we can keep, Phoenix is hanging on in the play-in right now. If we can put a major dent in that would make me very, very happy, especially there.
I like it.
Is that MVP talk part of the narrative AD was talking about? He got so many narratives right now, I can't keep track of them.
Okay, now, for once, y'all know me. For once, I came in with actual notes, right?
Oh, look at that.
Because I don't do this. I don't do that. I feel like Graff looked at my notes. Because I'm picking OKC.
Have I looked at your notes?
No, he does not.
Okay.
But I'm picking OKC too because OKC has little brothered you and sunned you around.
No doubt.
And just basically kicked your rear end. And at some point, you got to get tired of having the sand kicked in your face. All right? At some point, you got to bow up and say, you know what? You're not going to push me around like this. And I understand OKC's got a deep and talented roster, and they do have the MVP. And they've got dudes on there that know their roles and play it to a T. But at some point, the Pelicans got to get a stiff back and say, you know what? We're going to take this stuff off you tonight. And the way OKC has handled this team the last few times it's played it, OKC's got to be walking in saying, all right, we can push them around. We can make them wilt. And that's got to be a feeling that you got to get out of your system if you're the Pelicans.
I will say this, even going back to the playoffs, they have not seen Zion Williamson yet, even this year.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Not one time.
That is crazy.
Not one time. Yeah.
So you're talking 6 games, 4 in the playoffs,
correct.
And then 2 this year.
Correct.
Wow.
And
Didn't realize
I'll
that.
take the way Zion's playing right now. It's going to be hard to bully him around. I mean, see, and now are they going to put Lou Dort on Zion? Well, because that's something they haven't had. They haven't, because last year you knew like Dort was going to get Brandon Ingram,
Right.
And if Zion was playing in the playoff series, then what do you do if you're Oklahoma City? You can't put Dort on both of them. Mm-hmm. So I just think it's going to change what OKC is going to have to do. And like you said, it's going to be a little harder to push us around when you've got the freight train coming.
And I hope the officiating is consistent because OKC gets away with a lot of contact, a lot of handsy stuff. And if they let them play, then that's going to be to Zion's benefit, I believe, because he'll play through some of that stuff. If you want to whack around and that kind of stuff, all right, that's fine. Just be consistent about it because Z's going to get through somebody.
And the last time we beat them, which was very early in the season last year, we had a big comeback in November. It was very early in the season. Zion took the game over in the second half. They had no answer for him.
And by the way, there's actually 2 meetings left with OKC, but I think this one coming up at the beginning of February is really going to be the last kind of real opportunity to beat them because they play the Thunder the very last game of the season.
Right.
And the way things are going, I know there's a lot of basketball left, but I don't think that game is going to mean anything to OKC. So we might see the G League Oklahoma City Blue a lot in that game. So this will be the one where they have a chance to beat some of their main players. For the February game that I'm looking forward to the most, I went with the game on Saturday the 8th at Sacramento because it's 2 days after the trade deadline. And obviously with the Kings in the situation they're in right now.
Jim.
I mean,
outside the box.
This is another conversation altogether, but I'm happy. I'll be happy, period, when the trade deadline is over. But I think that'll be an interesting game just to see, okay, how do these 2 teams look now? Things have settled in. The trade deadline's over. We don't have to spend all this time talking about players that want out and so on and so forth.
Great call.
And then I had an honorable mention of Sunday the 23rd home game against the Spurs. It's a weekend home game and against Wemby. So I think that there's only 4 home games in the whole month of February. So it wasn't that hard to pick from that small collection. But I think people will be excited, and I'm sure the arena will be full for that one as well against the Spurs on a weekend.
Yep. All right, as always, guys, a pleasure. Mr. John DeShazier, Todd Graffagnini, thank you, gentlemen. We'll see you tonight for the call against the Celtics. Y'all remember that last game, huh? It was fun.
If all the games down the stretch are like the game in Boston, we're going to have a good time. That was one of the ones that it was such a good game. Yeah, you were disappointed that you didn't win, but it wasn't like, man, I had the feeling of, wow, that was awesome. It just stunk that shot did not go in. I mean, the difference between winning and losing.
I think we'd take one of those a week. It doesn't even have to be every single game.
I mean, that was
once a week.
That was one of the games where you looked at it and you said, okay, that's what it's supposed to look like.
Yes,
that's what it's supposed to look like.
NBA. That's pro basketball.
Yeah, this is what the Pelicans thought they would be, and this is what they're supposed to look like.
No doubt. All right, guys, we'll see you next time.
TGI Jim, it's Friday, which means Mr. Eichenhofer has a pair of things for us. Trending numbers and weekend showdown. What are we starting with, Jim?
Well, Mallory, I'm glad you asked. We're going to start with the trending number, and I'm going to go with plus 34. And this is very specific to the fact that this is the last home game for the Pelicans in about 12 days. So, I mean, I'm looking forward to just having the opportunity to be in the blender, hopefully have a good time with the crowd. And Zion is plus 34. He has a plus minus in the 5 home games that he's played this season. I'm looking forward to him getting an opportunity to play against Boston again. And by the way, in the game that the Pelicans played a couple weeks ago against the Celtics, New Orleans also won his minutes by 4 in the 28 minutes that he played. So just a little small nugget there, that the fact that they've played really well. I mean, they've played well overall in his minutes throughout the season, but especially at home, that they've outscored teams by 34 points when he's been on the floor. Just a little sign of hopefully what we'll see, next season and beyond. For the weekend showdown, I like to go with Sunday games because it's closer to when we record again. But there really weren't that many good options in terms of Western teams playing against each other on Saturday or Sunday. Fortunately, there's a very kind of a no-brainer from Friday night, and that is ESPN game at 9 o'clock between Phoenix and Golden State. And the reason that this game is so significant in the scheme of the play-in race in the West, right now the Suns are in 9th place at 24 and 22.
Okay.
The Warriors are in 11th place at 24 and 23. So the Warriors actually have a chance to move ahead of the Suns tonight just by winning in a game that's in San Francisco, even though they're in 2 spots behind them in the standings, but they're only a half game behind them. So in record. So looking forward to that one. And I mean, I think we're going to see a lot of these type matchups over the rest of the season. And by the way, I mentioned a couple weeks ago that I wanted to start doing a good dude of the week. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to do this every week, but wanted to kind of think about this a little bit too, that obviously today's January 31st. It's the last day of the month. Going back to January 1st, we experienced something that was so horrific in New Orleans with the terrorist attack that happened on Bourbon Street. And I feel like it's one of those things where the news cycle goes so fast that people move on to other stuff. And I mean, unfortunately, there's been other things that have happened that have been terrible in the country, including the plane accident that happened in Washington, D.C. But it feels like in some ways that people have kind of not moved past it, but it feels like so long ago that January 1st happened and that incident happened, even though it was literally this same month.
Right.
But for the good dude and dudettes of the week, or you could say of the month in this case, I just want people to think about, and we need to just keep praising the first responders to that incident, the police that were there. I remember seeing the video of police running immediately when they saw and heard about what happened, and also just the people that donated blood. There's so many people that helped out. I think they still have talked about how there's a shortage of blood in the area. So just wanted to end on that note this week, as far as just remembering that those people, there's been other things that have happened in New Orleans, the snowstorm. I mean, there's been so many things that have distracted people, but just to keep those people in mind and just remember that there's still people out there that are hurting from that incident, and just wanted to acknowledge them in that way.
Yeah. I think that's one of those things that you look at too, whether it's the start of the year to what happens here now, man. It's all moments where you're not even, I guess the hardest way to put it is expecting, right? Mm-hmm. And you see that happen all the time, where something happens and people just react and go into action and do their jobs. And we use it sometimes as it's their jobs. At the same time, you think of their jobs are one of the most difficult things that you can think of, and puts their lives at risk. And, they have families and they have homes to go to as well. So, thanks for doing that. And it's kind of, I wouldn't say unnerving, but it's one of those things that's eye-opening, where even here, as we know, we're part of an NFL team and stuff, and there's things that have been done around here that have increased security because of all of that, that we probably normally wouldn't have had.
Yeah.
Because of that. So it's a constant reminder,
Yeah, and that part of it is so unfortunate too, because it's one of those things where it is a reminder of what happened on January 1st, and it's one of those things where you totally understand all of the security precautions and that kind of thing. But you also know that there's a balance that you want to be able to continue. People want to live the way that they live and enjoy the freedom that we have, and you don't want to go so far that that part of it is affected as well. But yeah, it's something just that I thought about recently, that it feels like so long ago in the scheme of things because of everything that's happened lately. But I just thought about it. It's January 31st that happened this same month. It's crazy. And it feels like so long ago.
And we've experienced it more than anyone else from this aspect of it with where we work. Obviously, it's literally across the street on home games and road games for us too as well from the Superdome. And the NFL, when that season ends, they take over the host city for that Super Bowl. They have. And then you add what happened to the first. And the reason I bring that up is we have had a ton of changes. And obviously, if you're listening right now and you're a Pels fan, your lives have changed a little bit as well, too, from where you park and where you go and the extra security. And you guys are open with your eyes and see all the different, securities that they've done there as well when you have all the street closures. I mean, it's just, but that's just what it is now, So we've all kind of been affected, if that makes any sense whatsoever. But, yeah, it's always good to just give a little shout out to everybody and to us, too, because, hey, we all care, so.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, I don't think you can really acknowledge and thank the people that do the police work, that do the security work enough, because it does seem like a lot of times that it's been one of those things that has kind of gone by the wayside over time, and there's just so much negativity sometimes towards some of those areas as well. So there's a lot of second guessing about stuff, and so I just want to give credit to the people that have put in the time. And like you said, I mean, I feel like I don't really have a real job sometimes when I sit behind a computer at a laptop all day. There's not a lot of danger there. So I give credit to the people that are putting themselves in a position where, it's a risk every day when you go to work.
No, you say that, but you also sit next to Graf during games. You never know. Wayward pencil.
That's true.
A stool.
True. And I could get some paper cuts sometimes when I'm handling the stat pages and stuff like that. But, so very dangerous.
Well said. Try to put a little humor into something that's tough to talk about. As always, appreciate you for tuning us in. Enjoy your weekend, and then next week should be interesting. The Pels go on the road. It is Super Bowl week in New Orleans, and more importantly, we'll be back with you on the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast. Join us 3 times per week on Pelicans.com, the Pelicans mobile app, the iHeartRadio app, or where you get your podcasts. And be sure to give Jim and Gus a follow on X at Jim_Eichenhofer and GCat_17. We'll see you next time, right here on the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast.